I've come to the floor today to give some perspective on the debate going on in Washington about the so-called fiscal cliff. This so-called fiscal cliff is a misnomer. But what it reflects is the concern that unless we act, our economy is going to be hit by a significant austerity in 2013, not at 12:01 a.m. on January 1st, but over the course of a year. So it's not a cliff. It's more like if we don't do something, we're going to start on a slope. But we're not falling off any cliff at 12:01 a.m. on January the 1st. Now, fortunately, there's an easy way to address one of the major parts of this puzzle. That is, the Senate earlier this year passed a tax relief bill for the middle class. It would extend for one full year all of the Bush-era tax cuts on middle-class families. Now, that's sitting in front of the House of Representatives. And President Obama said, if they pick it up and pass it tomorrow, I'll put my pen to it immediately. Now, that's one thing that could be done right now. But the House Republicans will not take it up. I say, if they were to take it up today, they're not doing anything over there anyway. Pick it up today, pass it, President signs it. I think you're going to see a lot of middle-class families maybe even do a little bit more Christmas shopping because they'll know their taxes are not going to go up next year. And that'll help spur our economy. So again, and I would point out that some of my friends on the other side of the aisle here in the House have been talking about doing that very thing. So there are some Republicans who recognize that this would be one of the best things we could do, and that is pass the middle-class tax cut that we passed here in July. Nonetheless, I keep hearing that what we really need to do to address the so-called fiscal cliff is to enact significant entitlement reform. Now, what does that mean, entitlement reform? Let's be upfront with the American people. When you hear our friends, the Republicans and others, talk about entitlement reform, they're talking about three things: cutting Social Security, cutting Medicare, and cutting Medicaid. That's it. That's what they're talking about. Now, for example, let's take a look at Social Security. It's become an article of faith almost among a lot of people around this city and some think tanks and others that one of the ways to reduce the national debt is to, quote, reform Social Security. But that's really fishy, because Social Security can pay full benefits, 100% until 2033. And by law, it is not allowed to add to the deficit or debt. So therefore, it's not driving our long-term debt. So what's really going on here? Well, I think that one of the ways to figure it out is look closely at the proposals under consideration. If you look closely, you'll find that almost all of these so-called serious proposals to save Social Security is you save it by cutting it. Now, for one instance, one proposal is to raise the retirement age so that hardworking Americans, including nurses, cashiers, carpenters, mechanics, truck drivers, have to work even longer before they can retire and claim their full benefits. Well, I would remind people that we already raised the retirement age. We did that in the 80s, from 65 to 67. That's being phased in right now. That Bowles Commission, what do they want? They want to raise it to 69. I would remind people that life expectancy at age 65, that is the amount of time you're going to live after you reach 65, has not grown equally among all Americans. Not surprisingly, higher income Americans have seen much larger gains in life expectancy after 65 than low and moderate income families. So, you raise the retirement age for Social Security, you help those who have money, and you hurt those who don't. That's exactly what it is. It would hurt low and moderate income Americans who work at some of the most physically demanding jobs in our economy. It hits them the hardest. So we can just dismiss that. I was just looking at the list of people proposing that we raise the retirement age. Bowles, Simpson, the Third Way, Lloyd Blankfein, CEO of Goldman Sachs. How about that? I think he's in his 70s. I don't know where. He's still working, making gazillions of dollars a year, but he wants to raise the retirement age on people that don't have cushy jobs like he's got. Senator Coburn's budget, American Enterprise Institute, Heritage Foundation, Cato Institute, the Republican Study Committee. Oh yes, the Ryan budget, by the way, and we know what the voters of America thought about the Ryan budget. Well, anyway, a whole list of people there that are saying, yeah, we got to raise the retirement age. Well, look and see what kind of jobs they got, what kind of work they do during their lifetime. Now, another proposal we've heard about to kind of fix Social Security is to base future cost of living adjustments, the COLAs, on the so-called chained CPI. Chained CPI. That's a phrase that you're hearing more and more of. What it does is it basically reduces annual cost of living adjustments. It's nothing more than a benefit cut by using a measurement of inflation that reflects the costs faced by seniors even more poorly than the current measurement. In terms of take-home benefits for an individual beneficiary, for a 65-year-old, the chained CPI would result in an average benefit cut of $136 per year for a 65-year-old. However, because of compounding, the benefit cut would increase to an average of $560 per year less for a 75-year-old retiree. That's a severe benefit cut, particularly for the oldest Americans who are most likely to have gone through all of their own retirement savings and must rely totally on Social Security. Furthermore, the chained CPI is simply not a more accurate way to measure inflation. Rather, it more accurately measures the degree to which people are reducing their costs. As a result, it can mask big changes in the quality of life for Americans. Now, I've talked at town meetings and talked to other people about chained CPI. Here's the way I describe it. Here's chained CPI. You're an elderly person, you're on Social Security. Because of heating costs or because of maybe some medical costs or whatever, you found that your budget's pretty tight. So instead of buying beef for dinner, you decide to buy some chicken. So you reduce your costs a little bit. Well, chained CPI would look at that and say, okay, since your costs have come down, we'll reduce your COLA. Well, okay, now you've got your COLA reduced, you're sort of locked in there. And then you say, well, my budget's still a little tight, I'll go to beans. Well, now you've gone from beef to chicken, now you're eating beans. Well, the chained CPI say, oh, you're eating beans, that means your costs are down, we'll reduce your COLA even further. Pretty soon you're reduced to drinking warm water for soup. And the COLAs keep coming down even more. That's what chained CPI does to an elderly person. Don't be fooled by it. Don't be fooled by a fancy chained CPI. It's just, I say that chained CPI is like you're on a boat and you've got to swim to shore and someone puts a big log chain around your ankle and says, now swim. You're going to drag you to the bottom. Chained CPI chains you, drags you down. Mr. President, there are long-term challenges confronting the Social Security system. We all know that. The baby boomers are retiring. We have fewer workers paying into the system. We know this is coming. We've seen it coming for decades. That's why we created the trust fund in the first place. As I said, and I repeat, the trust fund pays 100% benefits until 2033, 21 years from now. Okay? What happens in 2033? A lot of people say, oh, the Social Security system is going to go belly up. No, it doesn't. What happens, unless changes are made, in 2033, the Social Security Trust Fund will pay out 75% of anticipated benefits. Well now, what happens if we reduce unemployment, I ask? What if we reduce unemployment from its present 7.7% down to 4%? Well, guess what? That 2033 now goes up to 2040, 2050, and beyond. Because you have more people paying into the system because they're working. So one of the best ways to fix Social Security is let's get jobs back for people in this country. And that's why a lot of us who are committed to honestly strengthening Social Security, are saying no. Don't put Social Security in there as any part of a grand bargain. Should have no part of it whatsoever. And there are approaches that can strengthen Social Security. I happen to be privileged to chair the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. And we've had hearings on this. And quite frankly, one of the ways is legislation that I introduced earlier this year that would provide seniors with greater economic security. My proposal does it in 3 ways. First, we actually raise the amount of Social Security that people get by $65 a month. You might say, how can that save it? I thought we're supposed to cut benefits, not increase them. I say, no, there's a way. Increase it by $65 a month. Well, you might say to an upper income person, $65 a month is not much, but to someone who is paid in like the minimum amount into Social Security, they've had low wage jobs, minimum wage type jobs most of their life, $65 a month over a year can be quite a bit. Secondly, my proposal ensures that COLAs better really reflect a cost of living for seniors than what we presently do right now, and we certainly don't do chained CPI. Now, how do we do this? Thirdly, by applying the payroll tax to every dollar of eligible earnings by removing the so-called wage cap. Now, we don't do it over 1 year. I said we do it over 10 years. Just phase it in over 10 years. For the life of me, I've never been able to understand, why is it fair? Why is it equitable? Say for someone who's making $50,000 a year to pay their payroll taxes on every dollar they earn. But for someone who's making $500,000 a year, they only pay payroll taxes on the first 20 cents of every dollar they earn. The rest of the 80 cents, they pay no payroll taxes on. So we've talked about this for a long time. We've never done it. It's time to remove the wage cap. That allows us to pay $65 or more per month per person. And according to the trustees of the Social Security Trust Fund, the 100% benefit that would expire in 2033 and go to 75% would be extended to 2050. Just by those. We extend the life to 2050, $65 more a month per person, and we make it fair for everyone by making sure everyone pays into the trust fund on every dollar they earn. Now, these are the kind of changes that we should consider as part of any effort to reform Social Security. But regrettably, I don't hear those who want to put Social Security on the table as part of a debt reduction package calling for these types of reforms. They want to just cut benefits. That's all. So, Mr. President, as we work to resolve the fiscal cliff and our long-term deficits, our core principle should be that we need a resolution that is good for the middle class. And that starts with strengthening and protecting programs like Social Security. It also means we should take this opportunity to continue to support hardworking families, creating jobs, particularly through programs like infrastructure investment. We should also continue to provide help to working Americans by giving them more money in their pocket to spend and drive the economy forward, like the middle class tax cut that I just talked about at the beginning here. However, we must not continue the payroll tax cut of the last 2 years because of the threat that it poses to the integrity of Social Security. Remember, 2 years ago was a response to help middle-class families through tough times. We reduced the amount that they pay into Social Security from 6.4% to 4.4%, 2%. And to make up for that, we put money from the general fund into Social Security Trust Fund. First time we've ever done that. I said it was wrong then, and I still say it's wrong. Well, then we extended it for 1 year till the end of this year. And I thought that would be the end of it. Now I'm hearing some voices saying, well, we had to extend this payroll tax cut. Two of the critical strengths of Social Security is that it is universal and it's self-funded. No dollar paid in benefits comes from any source other than the payroll tax. As such, Social Security does not add one dime to our deficit. Again, that fact alone is a strong argument for those of us defending Social Security from misguided attempts to cut the system in the name of deficit reduction. Now, we have often said, I've often argued, Social Security doesn't add one dime to the deficit. Never has. However, if we're taking money out of the general fund, which we know is borrowed money, and we're putting that into the trust fund, then the trust fund is now taking money that is borrowed. No longer can we say that every dime paid out of that is from the payroll tax. It's coming from the general fund. Now, I think we made a mistake in doing that 2 years ago and extending it. Now is the time to end it. It must not be extended. And I, for one, will do whatever I can as a United States Senator to stop the extension of the payroll tax cut in order to help solve the deficit and in order to help middle-class families. So how could we help middle-class families? It's very easy. First of all, pass the tax cut extension that we have sitting before the House. Secondly, rather than cutting payroll taxes by 2%, we should have what I call the Make Work Pay tax credit that we did under the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. That credit provided working Americans with $400 per person, $800 per couple, both in 2009 and in 2010, and we can adjust that. We could adjust that credit doubled to $1,600 per couple to replace the payroll tax cut. So I'm saying is, as you put the 2% back up, where everyone pays back in at 6.4%, what we do on the other side is we provide for a Make Work Pay tax credit that goes to people who are working, because obviously you don't get the 2% payroll tax cut if you're not working. And the Make Work Pay tax credit would also go to those who are working and make it exactly the same amount of money as you had on the Social Security payroll tax cut. And this would have a greater bang for the buck because it would better target working Americans of modest means who tend to spend more of what they get back. And let me just basically say what I mean by that. See, under the Social Security payroll tax cut, the 2% cut, the maximum amount of money you would get would be at the highest level you pay into Social Security, which is $110,000 on your payroll of $110,000. So you get $2,200 back. That's for someone making at least $110,000 a year. If you're making $20,000 a year, you'd only get $400 back. So the higher your income, the more you get back. The lower your income, the less. Just topsy-turvy. Should be the other way around. There should be more benefits to low income and less benefits to higher income. Well, with this tax credit, you do. You get more that goes to people that are making $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year than you do to higher income people. So that's why the Make Work Pay tax credit is much better than extending the Social Security payroll tax. So, Mr. President, we're at a turning point in our economy. We can either move forward with an agenda that will strengthen the middle class, or we can be dragged backward by misguided policies that consign us to additional decades of unequal growth and stagnant wages for hard-working families. I stand ready to work with any of my Senate colleagues to reduce the deficit and reduce the debt, but not at the expense of hard-working middle-class families who make this country the great country that it is.